In today's edition of the series, we will be joined by Akhtar Badshah, who is the founder and chief catalyst at the Catalytic Innovators Group. Akhtar is an expert on social impact, philanthropy, CSR, and international development, an author and an artist. He is the founder and chief catalyst of Catalytic Innovators Group, a new consulting practice focused on accelerating social impact through catalytic innovation. He is a distinguished practitioner and associate teaching faculty at the University of Washington School of Business, the Bottle campus, and Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. He is also faculty lead at START Center at the Department of Public Health. Formerly, he has been the director of Microsoft Citizenship and Public Affairs. Amongst his many responsibilities, he managed the philanthropic elements of Microsoft's Youth Spark, a global initiative designed to help young people into opportunities through training, employment, and help to start their own ventures. His latest book, Purpose Mindset: How Microsoft Inspires Its Employees and Alumni to Change the World, is published by HarperCollins Leadership and is also on a Microsoft Alumni Network imprint. He's also the co-author of the book Technology at the Margins: How It Meets the Needs of Emerging Markets, published by Wiley & Sons, and the author of Our Urban Future, published by Z Books. Akhtar also serves on the board of several organizations, including President Global Washington, Microsoft Alumni Network, and the Indus Entrepreneur Seattle chapter. Welcome, Akhtar. Thank you so much for taking time out and joining us for this chat today.
Thank you very much, Mahamaya and Arthan for inviting me. I had a terrific time with my conversation when we had it a couple of months ago. So yeah, no, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm glad that you're doing this series at this time where we are still living in these uncertain environments.
Yes, no, I think we were just having that conversation, and it's so true. I mean, and there's so much need for conversation and inspiration at this point. So it's great to have you with us. So I'm just going to just jump right into the conversation, and maybe you can start with just telling us a little bit about your journey over the last, few decades, from being an architecture student to founding your own organization and writing about this purpose mindset and really talking about it as a concept. So it would be great to hear a little bit about that.
And I'm not necessarily sure most people want to emulate my journey. It just shows that I really couldn't focus on anything. I graduated as an architecture student from India, went to MIT to get my master's, got recruited to teach at MIT for a new program that was started called Designing for Islamic Societies, did my PhD there, and then got an opportunity to work for a new nonprofit that was just being launched by colleagues that I knew within the UN system. Okay. And decided that why not, and this was in 1993. The focus was on mega cities like Mumbai, New Delhi, Calcutta, and London, New York, Los Angeles. At that time, there were just 10 that were over 10 million. Mm. Today, there are many, many more cities that are that huge. But that kind of moved me into the nonprofit sector. My wife joined Microsoft, and then she moved to Seattle. So I moved to Seattle and started another nonprofit organization at that time focused on bridging the digital divide, and was instrumental in running that till Microsoft came calling and asked me to lead their philanthropic efforts, which I did for a decade, and then decided it was time to make a move and went to teaching and writing and consulting. Mm-hmm. And I basically kind of, taken my career, and every decade I change and do something different. It just keeps me fresh. Yeah. Also allows me to take all of the experience that I have and share it with others in a meaningful way.
No, thank you. And I think what you said right at the very beginning, saying that you weren't sure people wanted to emulate your career journey because it was not something that was necessarily very clearly charted out from the beginning. I think that's a space that we find a lot of us and especially a lot of young people in. So I think they just sometimes being okay with that ambiguity and okay to kind of take shifts and make jumps at different stages and being open to opportunities that may present themselves to you is, I think, is also a great skill to have. And I think very important, because I think we put so much pressure nowadays on just knowing everything, that I need to know this like from day one, exactly what I'm going to do and what my career is going to be. But sometimes in that process, one might lose out on opportunities that may come out of places where you hadn't expected. So I think that's a very important part of your journey that is actually interesting to know and talk about. So thank
And
you for sharing.
I think that's one of the key defining aspects of how I see myself.
Mm.
I mean, we, as you pointed out, as parents, in always define our kids and ourselves by who we become or who we want to be
Yeah.
versus who you want to serve and what you want to serve.
Yeah.
So if you look at it from a who you want to be lens, then career becomes very important. I need to be a doctor, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be X, Y, and Z,
Mm.
and that's the space I will be in.
Yeah.
But if you think about it from who you want to serve, then the opportunity to think in a far more expansive way becomes. And your training is just one tool that gets you there.
Yeah.
But you're allowed to then bring in your experiences to bear.
Yeah.
So it's just a mindset shift.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I totally, I mean, what you're saying resonates a lot with how I think about things as well. But I think it's sometimes it's that mindset shift is what is actually, like you said, critical, but it is what sometimes also doesn't happen or becomes like some kind of a stumbling block, that trying to find that balance between, what you want to be and what you want to, who you want to serve, sometimes is where people get stuck. And that's, I think that's a tricky one to navigate for a lot of people. So I mean, I'm really looking forward to digging a little deeper into some of this. So maybe you can start with, I know a lot of your journey started around the time you were at Microsoft, specifically around the whole idea of purpose mindset. So if you could talk a little bit about that and how that led to actually you thinking about purpose and like, and the purpose mindset as well.
So, I mean, so what fascinated me about Microsoft is, my wife joined Microsoft in 1993 and on the East Coast. And every October, we would hear this craziness in Redmond at headquarters, the campus, where people were running around raising money for all sorts of different causes. And you kind of always you kind of say, now that's interesting. Why are people doing that?
Mm.
And then when we moved to Seattle in 1998, and I was able to experience it secondhand because I was in the community and running a nonprofit organization. And, we had the Gujarat earthquake at that time, and I was able to raise $1 million in support of the local efforts there.
Wow.
And that majority of that came from Microsoft and its employees. The
Mm.
Microsoft match, all driven by employees, no corporate money.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to see people from all walks of life,
Mm.
janitors in my kids' school to elderly women, just walking to my doorstep and handing me $5.
Mm.
And you kind of look at it and say, why this generosity?
Yeah.
What is driving that? And when I joined Microsoft, I was obviously central to it.
Mm.
And a lot of it was how certain actions that were taken long time ago created an environment which actually allowed individuals to build that muscle around purpose.
Mm.
That's in 1983, Mary Gates, Bill's mother, asks Bill to set up a direct payroll payment program for the United Way, where people could basically just sign up and say $10 every paycheck can go to United Way. No match, nothing.
Mm.
In 85, the chief legal officer joins the company, Bill Newcomb, and he recognizes that here are these young people who are working extremely hard to change the world through technology,
Mm.
are going to establish roots in this community, are going to grow up here, are going to get married here, are going to have kids here. And there has to be an opportunity for them to discover the community in which they're going to live. And the Microsoft philanthropy program was born then with that intention. And the employee matching was the carrot, the incentive to get people engaged. And that to me became the muscle that kind of changed the ability for people to kind of get engaged and discover more than what they would otherwise just do in their work.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's it sounds like such a great way to really get people involved and get people engaged, because I think, like what you said, right? People when you even did the Gujarat earthquake relief collections, people who just came out of their way to give whatever little bit they could. It could be $5, $10, $15. But I think people somewhere intrinsically are searching for a way to make that connect and to find that meaning, or to do something beyond what they otherwise do in their regular lives. So I think to be able to actually encourage that and create a platform to enable people to be connected to such causes or initiatives or passions is so important in today's days and times. So I think that is what you were able to do through Microsoft's program, and it's I think quite an inspiring story on its own as well. So I mean, just maybe taking from there, how did that experience, how did you actually create some kind of a structure around it for people at the company, and what is the kind of advice you would give to organizations who might be trying to inculcate the culture of this kind of a culture within their own setups as well? How easy is it? How what does that journey or path look like?
So let me just, McKinsey just came up with a report yesterday, which focuses on purpose in employees.
Mm.
And the basically report says that if you don't create an opportunity for purpose, employees will leave.
Mm.
And they have this great, they're like typical McKinsey with data and analysis.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are two figures that stood out. One figure in particular, 85% of the senior management believes that the company has a purpose. 85% of the rank and file employees don't believe that the company has a purpose. Right? So now you've kind of got a massive disconnect.
Yeah.
There are three spheres. One is identifying the purpose of the company, aligning your work to that purpose, and believing that your work is adding value beyond just generating revenue.
Yes.
And then your own purpose in life, which goes outside of the company. And these three elements need to be brought together.
Mm.
So at Microsoft, And I don't think that nobody actually did this plan, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
plan was create an environment in which employees will get engaged, use incentives, and let's create energy behind it,
Yeah.
right? So very early on, October was the month of giving, and a lot of energy was just put into getting people out to do fun things in support of the community. People would get Bill and Steve to swim across Bill Lake. There were competitions between groups and, throw balloons and people offered up, auctions, ride my car, take you for dinner with Bill and basketball with Steve. And it was just this environment where it was fun.
Mm.
But in a competitive environment, the fun can also become overly aggressive,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? So then you had to dial it down and create other incentive structures. As people age and new people come in, you're no longer that small company of 2,000 people where everybody knew each other.
Yeah.
You're suddenly a much larger company, and not everybody that comes in has understood the same environment. So structures have to be created. And what has happened over the last 40 years is that it has evolved. And it has continued to evolve because of the environments in which we are in and the issues that need to be tackled. Today, you know, earlier it was all about money. Now it's also about volunteerism and time,
Yeah.
in which the company then matches with money. More people are getting out and volunteering work. Now it's micro volunteering. You can actually sit on your table for 15 minutes and do something and it can get counted because you can do things online. You're not able to go out and physically do things. So this evolution has to continuously happen. But the big story is start somewhere. Start somewhere and then build on it. And Microsoft took a bet and Bill Gates took a bet and said, yeah, we'll match up to $10,000, knowing full well that if that happened, it would have actually bankrupted the company. But Bill also knew that nobody was really going to write $10,000. Every employee was not going to write that. But it was a way to encourage.
Mm.
So certain visionary incentives, some far-reaching goal, and then all sorts of incentives as time evolves to make sure that this fire, this moment that got turned into a movement does not get snuffed off. And I think those are the lessons people can learn. But the important thing is that the workplaces where we spend a significant amount of our time, and the workplace should provide ways in which people can get engaged into the community, and in doing so, bring back the value to themselves and to the business. Just one last thought before I stop here is since the 90s, we've been kind of driven by the growth mindset, which Professor Carol Dweck has written a seminal work around how we should move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. But growth mindset, in my mind, is kind of a closed loop. It's a loop that is your growth that leads to business growth that leads to your growth. However, purpose mindset is a way to actually create a virtuous cycle which includes the community in it. So it's your growth that leads to community growth, that leads to business growth, that leads to community growth, that leads to your growth. So it's a far more open cycle. It's an inclusive approach rather than a non-inclusive approach. And I think that's the reason why I started thinking about purpose as a driving factor.
Yeah. No, I think that makes so much sense. And I was actually, you've already kind of given an explanation to what I was going to ask you or talk about next, which was, you talk about this movement from from me to we, and as a concept, and that's talked about significantly in your book as well. So I think what you just said in terms of moving into that inclusive kind of way of looking at things and moving beyond the growth mindset to a purpose mindset does touch upon some of that. But could you just dig a little, I mean, go a little deeper into that? And one is, of course, like companies and organizations trying to create this culture and making that opportunity for people and their employees to really be able to engage in something beyond just themselves and the company's growth, but like you said, community's growth. Do you think there's a way of really trying to inculcate a purpose mindset even outside, like schools, colleges? How do you get young people to begin actually thinking about some of these things before maybe they're even in a job? How does it become something that's almost part of your education or your growth into being an active citizen of a country or a nation or the world?
It's fascinating. Somebody who read my book works with actually young girls. I mean, not young, but girls, and empowering them and getting them into careers. In the emerging markets, Kenya, India, Rwanda, other parts of the world. And she basically said, your book is very close to Who Moved My Cheese. And you should actually do a version for young people. And I did give a talk to Ashoka University to a whole lot of students. So what I highlight in my book are 5 principles of how you can activate your purpose, which works for all of us. First, work from your strengths. Every single one of us has some strengths.
Yes.
Don't try and fix something, a problem. We are always taught to do a SWOT analysis. I would rather try and do an analysis that discovers where you want to be versus fixing a problem. Appreciative inquiry is another approach that actually looks at discovering the future and the possibilities versus fixing what is not working. So discovering strengths allows you to do that. Work from strengths. In one of the profiles that I did of a couple at Microsoft who, after several tries, finally gave birth to a son, but he got a stroke during delivery and is partially paralyzed on one side. And for 2 years, they actually focused on trying to overcome his weakness. Let's build the strengths on the side that is not functioning. Till they met a neurosurgeon in Italy where they lived and introduced them to a concept called the mirror concept, where your body emulates, the weak part of your body actually emulates the part of the body that is working. And they actually got to get to focus on Mario's strengths. And in doing so, the child for the first time saw joy in the parents' eyes. And the body started emulating. Now the child is about 11 years old and does mostly regular things. No. They've given a TED talk. You can go look it up. It's called Fight the Stroke. And so that's just one tangible example of what strength does. Yeah. Second, put on the lens of abundance. We are always looking at scarcity. But there is a lot that is out there, small resources that can be turned into big efforts. Nobody starts something with, maybe some people do, with massive amounts of resources. You find something and then you build on it. And it's that attitude of abundance. I will go seek it out. Yeah. Versus, oh, I don't have enough. I don't have enough time. No, you have time. Right? Third, don't focus on how efficient you are in what you are doing. Focus on the effectiveness of what you will do.
Yeah.
It's not about, you know, how well you do something, but it is about figuring out what exactly you want to do and the impact it will have. Right? Fourth, don't think about creating organizations. Think about creating movements. Organizations become the vessel through which movements eventually land at scale. But you want to create movements. Ideas are movements, ideas are what attract people. And then finally, move from singular acts of generosity to empathy and compassion. Kailash Satyarthi, who lives in India, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who has done work around eliminating child
Yes.
slavery, essentially told me that compassion is that central piece where you are willing to give your life for anybody. Now, most of us are not going to do that. Right? We're not going to be the Dalai Lama or the Kailash Satyarthi or anybody else, right? But we can keep the focus on moving from generosity to empathy to compassion. And on that journey, with these other four principles, you're actually shifting the lens by which you see the world. And the focus is actually not on the me, but on the we. You use the word passion. The passion is the focus on the me. I am passionate about doing something, so I should get this opportunity. Discover your purpose instead of your passion.
Mm.
The passion allows you to move into the we because it expands it beyond you into something much larger.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yes, that was so well put, and I think so highly inspiring. And also, I think if you really think about it, it's not something that's impossible to do, right? The 5 steps that you actually talked about are all simple. If you really think about it and move in that direction, it's not like something that is so out there that it cannot be achieved or done by anyone at any point of time in their life. So I think that is very, very useful. Just, and I would just recommend people to maybe read your book and go into some of these concepts in further detail, to really understand what you're talking about. It's very fascinating. So just to maybe end or wrap up some of these this conversation, the last year, or actually now going on to a year and a half almost, has been just generally overall tough for the world, has been tough for individuals, for organizations, for nations, for governments. How do you see hope, and do you see that there is a movement towards people actually thinking more about purpose and really trying to think in that direction? How do you see the next few years panning out? What are your views?
None of us should be alive at this point. This is an insidious virus. Yet, and yes, a lot of people have got impacted, and yes, there is a lot of suffering, and a lot of people lost their lives. But at the end, millions of people came together
Yes.
to do things that they had never done before. They coalesced, they challenged, they overcame, they created new routines, they created new opportunities, they created new systems. And that is the hope. That is what we need to build on. That is, in my mind, this 1 year and a half or 1 year and more is given people the ability to reflect on what is most important. And it is actually getting people to dig deeper. Even people in rural communities are rethinking values. Urban communities are rethinking values. Kids are trying to understand what their role should be. I think that's the energy that we need to capitalize on.
Yes.
Right? So the purpose allows you to create a renewable source of energy that heals you. It is the light within. It is your switch. You can either frown the whole day or you can smile the whole day. It's your choice. You smile, you light up the world. You frown, you frown. And I frown most of the time. Because that's just how we are. But when we smile, it changes. So, how do we light up the world? By turning on your own light switch. Purpose is that one simple step that you do. I will just do something for somebody.
Yeah.
But it is more than just that, because that attitude actually shifts the way in how you conduct business. It shifts the way how companies show up. It shifts the way companies are only made up of people. There is no company without people and a product. So these to me are the most important elements. So I urge your listeners to just smile, say hi to somebody, find a way to light up that switch, and in every small thing you do makes a difference. And I'll just end with something that has happened to me very recently. 5 people called me up a couple of weeks ago and said, we looked at your book and we want to talk to you. We found purpose in prison and we changed our lives around. And because of the work that we did, we were given parole and released early. But they all spent over 20 plus years in prison. And we've started an organization to rehabilitate prisoners. If people in that environment can find purpose, all of us can.
Yes.
In a place where there are zero resources, the only thing you have is your mind. And if you can activate that in that environment, we can activate our mind in any environment. And purpose is all about flipping that switch in your head as to which direction you want to go. And if we do that, then the world will be a better place.